Hi, everyone. This is John McCracken, and this is part two of my podcast with the great, legendary Jeff Berlin.
I would say that a lot of our playing reflects a lot of our. I mean, I was aggressive, and therefore my bass playing is aggressive. And, now I'm fairly well boring. It's like, ga da 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 da.
We should do a whole album of ABBA covers. I think that'd be nice.
I'd love to. I'd like to do like the ballads that we never really liked as children, but here they are now. The Longines Symphonette Society. Jeff plays Zamfir on the bass.
Richard Clayderman. The other guy. You should jam with him. I think it'd be a fun jam.
Well, people won't know this, but I could do Jeff covers Frankie Yankovic, the greatest polkas of all time. Track two.
See, but that's the sad part is now that might have actually some validity. The crazier, more out it is.
Jeff does Frankie, which doesn't sound very good for me, does it?
So getting back to so how did those sessions work? Where did you record with Bruford?
We recorded.
It was all in England, right?
It was all in England. I think the first couple were at Trident Recording Studios, where I believe the Beatles did "Hey Jude."
That's right. I think
And
so, yes.
that was. I mean, it's a huge studio, of course. I mean, I played in the studio with some history to it. I learned a lot there. I could not figure out why I could not get a blasting, ballsy, beefy, huge bass tone. I've sought it all my life, and quite frankly, and I'll say it right now on our little chat here, you're the first guy I think that had ever helped me realize what I would call a truly rotund and meaty,
Oh, thank you.
gutsy bass tone, what I had always really kind of sought.
Yeah, well, I remember reading things that you would always complain that you were always kind of too low in the mixes of some of those Bruford records.
Well, the
I have to
second one for sure.
I have to say Ron Mallett did a good job on Gradually Going Tornado, though.
I think it was an overcompensation to my being concerned about the second one because he couldn't hear bass
Yeah.
on a lot of it. I heard it at actually Don Airy's house.
Oh, really?
And we got the record. I put it on proudly. I said, wait a minute. I'm here. I remember playing these parts. And you hear wah, 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 yeah. And in the background, you hear like... I said, something isn't right here. The bass is supposed to be blasting right along with the drums. It's supposed to be an equal or general equal thing.
So you had no input into
None. I
mixes?
went home. I mean,
Sure.
I again had to learn to that if you want to use me under certain circumstances, that
Yeah.
is not all, of course.
Yeah.
That I require these things, and I don't think it's unfair for me to make those requests. But in the early days, don't get me. I mean, who would mix or who would record a bass player and not mix them in there? Patrick Moraz did the same thing, and that's what I was going to say earlier. It's like Alphonse Mouzon and I. I mean, when we met, I can hear the song in my head. It's on Patrick's record, and it was roaring. And we played it as a trio.
Yeah.
And Patrick was, on the piano. Alphonse was just burning.
Yeah.
And he was looking at me with his eyes open too. All these guys would look at me with their eyes open, like, wow, check this bass player out. Heard the record, and you hear the drums and the bass. And then on top, you hear rah, 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 piano, 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 and 150 darn stupid freaking synthesizers. My therapy's collapsing right here and now, I mean, how can
Well, I
they
guess we can figure out
do
whose
that?
record it was.
Oh my goodness, I could not figure that out.
That's-
Thing. I learned a lot from that, being disappointed on those two records. Oh, but
Yeah.
that record got me hired by Al DiMeola, Lenny White, the Brecker brothers, Brian Auger, Ray Barretto, and Tony Williams, and I. 1976. We all went to France to play a gig.
Really?
Al DiMeola,
Oh, my
Lenny
goodness,
White,
I never heard of this.
the Brecker brothers, Brian Auger, Ray Barretto, Tony Williams, and me.
Was it ever recorded or anything? It was a live
I
gig?
don't recall, but it was a festival.
Oh
and
my
I looked,
God.
and it's like name, huge, name, huge, name, huge, name, big name, huge name, huge name, Jeff Berlin on the bass.
In a tiny little font.
Tiny little thing, that's right.
With Jeff Berlin.
It was like a
Oh
side
my
man
God, I
village.
think there's probably some thing floating around somewhere out there.
I imagine so, but it was actually quite funny because after I got off the stage, because I played with that same boxer intensity that you were mentioning, I said, I'm with these guys. I said, I must attack. And when I got off the stage, it was possibly my first European interview of my life, or one of the first, and a mic like Tony Clifton
They were pushing in your face.
went right on my face, and I hear a guy go like, France radio, don't be scared, because I jumped back when this mic was shoved in my face. And what's the question? The first question I remember is like, you have a France radio. What do you think of Stanley Clark?
Perfect.
I'd say he's great. Thank you very much. Have a good day. He was gone. My first entry into publicity. Jeff Berlin liked Stanley Clark. Headline: Stop the presses.
So okay, so you did the Bruford, and then Alan left, and then you had the great unknown John Clark.
Yeah.
Who I saw that band in Philadelphia with John.
Oh, was that where, at the Tavern of the Decade?
I can't remember where it was, but it was a great gig, and John did a great job. I mean, he didn't. I mean, he sounded a little bit like Alan, but he wasn't trying to be Alan. And
I loved John.
But he did really go back into the unknown.
No.
I think he got a touring gig with somebody, like some established guy in Britain or something.
Cilla Black, it might have been, but I could be wrong. And if John hears this, he can correct me. But my time with John was great. What a marvelous guy! Marvelous guy.
Yeah.
Funny too. And he was not a drinker, but on those off nights when he drank, he never changed a whit. He just got funnier. He'd be like, like this, and he'd be sort of tipsy, and like, I think he walked up to some guy and he goes, "Hit me as hard as you can." And I said, "John, come here." I grabbed him.
He was not a big guy.
John, just come here, man.
What's with these guys? Jack Bruce. It was in a box. People. Is that the?
He said, "I'll tell you the quote. Janet, pull over." He said, there was a guy. "Janet, pull over. I want to hit him." Okay, dear. And while you're out, can you get me a quart?
Right.
After you pick your nose up off the sidewalk.
So how did it come about that you sang on that record? Because that's quite a gutsy thing to do.
It was an experiment, and it was a failed experiment, in my opinion. Other people might disagree, but I belted it out.
You're channeling Jack Bruce a lot.
Yeah, I would say Jack definitely figured. I had no style. And now when I sing the ballads, I'm more like Tony Bennett. I have no style as a vocalist, but I did channel Jack, and but I didn't have his pipes.
What propelled you guys to do vocals instead of just continue on the instrument because Alan left? Or?
I believe because Bill asked for it.
Oh.
I mean, we actually had a single out.
Really?
Yeah, we actually released a single. I don't know where it went. I can't imagine it went too far, but we had a single, and Joe Frazier was on one side and a vocal tune was on the other, so I sort of was leader of that band. I'll tell you a funny Bill Bruford story. Bill taught me from the early days, he said that when you work a crowd or play to a crowd or perform to a crowd, try not to perform just to the front rows, but try to perform to the back of the room. Mm-hmm. He says if you can somehow connect with them, you've connected with everyone in between. Right. So I took him to heart, and again, I was young and absolutely inexperienced in these matters, and fairly fearless in trying things out. So we played a gig in Boulder, Colorado, where we were in a bowl, a football, smallish dome, like bowl. And there was a lot of bands that day, and we were on, and we started to play. So I went right up to the edge of the stage, right up there, and looked out at the audience and started to play to them. No. And all of a sudden, something went flying by my head. Oh. And I saw it, and I felt, I did. And I heard a clatter behind me. Oh. And I went right back to the back where the band was, and I never moved out of that spot for the rest of the set.
At least it wasn't some guy's underwear.
I would rather, if it was going to hit me, I could have taken that. But it was a hard object. Somebody saw idiot on the front of the stage, clearly making an ass out of himself.
Oh, that's actually not funny.
And he was going to teach me a lesson, or she.
Wow. But
it went right by my head. I went right back. I was scared to death. Stupid rock fans. You don't see that at a jazz gig. I said F sharp minor.
Surprised you didn't jump down and go after them.
Nah. If I'd have known who it was, what was that joke? I'm not a wimp. My wife called me a wimp today, and I was so mad at her, I almost said something. No, I wouldn't have gone after anybody.
So after, I have a question because we talked about some, inventions and innovations. Obviously, Alan was an inventor too, but you were also like kind of at the vanguard of creating different ways of bass configuration and stuff, right? Thin necks and.
Oh yeah, you knew about that. It's not something that I've sort of hovered between popularity and not. I mean, my stock goes up and it goes down. And it's just my karma and my reality right now. My thing's going up now rather well because of you, I should say. But at the time, I created a lot of things that I didn't get credit for. I don't really mind, but what did I do? I mean, it was both education-oriented and both bass-oriented. When I was at Berkeley, they had no music that I could study that would help me to learn how to play the bass better. Just that's how it was. I was arranging a composition there, and that's really what the meat of the Berkeley course and the Berkeley School was for me. So one day I'm at they have what they call the library or the bookstore, and there's this book that says Chord Studies for Trombone, and I asked to see it, and when I opened it, it is exactly in my clef and exactly within the range of a bass guitar, goes no lower and no higher than the range of my instrument, and it's jazz studies. So I bought the book, and from when I saw the validity and the importance of this, I started to subsequently, as I got more and more well known, I started to tell people about trombone music, and then I got into transcriptions and would tell people about transcriptions, and then I got into chord tones and would tell people about chord tones. So there's sort of a common element in bass education now that proliferates, and I'm basically I didn't invent chord tones and I didn't invent trombone music, but I'm kind of the guy that promoted all of these things to people that did not know about these things. So in a sense, I feel a little responsible in a positive way that I changed bass education for the better. What else?
The thin neck thing, right? I mean, you were one of the first to.
Oh, you heard about that too. So the thin neck thing came about very late in the 1970s.
I forget what bass you were playing with Bruford. Did you have a couple?
I varied. I had an old jazz bass where the pickups were replaced, and that didn't quite. I was always experimenting because I couldn't quite find a sound. The only bass that actually worked great for me was the bass built by Glenn Kwan, the guy that built the Leo Kwan Badass Bass Bridge.
Sure, I remember seeing that on the back of every album.
Apparently
we have to right.
Yeah.
What does Jeff say? What was the quote? It was very funny.
Bill always did it. Apparently Jeff Berlin uses Leo Kwan Badass Bass Bridges because it added to the bass sound.
Sure.
That was another thing. Like I certainly didn't invent bass bridges, but I would say I'm the guy that fairly well promoted the importance of a bass bridge. That the uniqueness, that the sound of a bass can resonate and can produce something unique if the bass bridge resonates well with the wood.
Right.
So I did that,
The thin neck.
The thin neck thing was
at Gretsch, right?
It wasn't Gretsch. It was actually Guild, and I knew a guy. I was at a NAMM show, and I knew a guy, and he worked for Guild. And how are you? It was at a NAMM show, very early one. I said, well, I'm looking for a bass, and I wanted a thin neck instrument because I felt like if you could have lower action and a thinner neck, you would have a more fluid and easy time playing. He grabs a piece of paper and says, show me. I said, show me. I don't know what to do. So I drew out a very thin neck, and I drew out a rather low, I think I did a sideways view of frets and the neck and the strings. And about 6 months later, this bass appears on the market, and it was the very first, I think, one of the very first thin neck and low action basses in bass history. And I thought, son of a gun, that was my innovation, and I didn't get a penny for it. But that's sort of my story for a long time. So I added to that, and I would then, try to, in subsequent years, make sure I can get a thinner and neck and a lower action, only because, and Stanley Clark, by the way, had a thin neck too.
Or he had that alembic bass.
He had the alembic basses, and that was a thin, I think a very slender-ish kind of neck.
Was that like a Travis, did that have aluminum in that neck?
No, that's a Travis Bean.
Right. I know. I thought Olympic did that too, but probably I guess not.
I don't recall that. Travis Bean had that, and I do believe. No, I can't remember. Was it Travis Bean that did it? Put aluminum and wood.
Sure.
It's a nice experiment. So I started to use slender necks, and then in subsequent years, I would meet it up with people and say, "Use slender necks."
And you also used to do varied gauges, right?
Well, yeah, that's true too. I mean, the popular
mixed brands of string or gauges of strings.
Gosh, I didn't know I shared all this stuff with you, but and yeah, I would go down to We Buy Guitars on 48th Street. I knew Steve Friedman, and then up the street, I think, or across the street, I'd buy strings and would take 2 strings from this package and then 2 strings from that package, so that I could have strings that were reasonably slender and in a gauge that was not available on the market at that time.
Yeah.
Which is something I'd also promoted to string guys. I said, why don't you get 40, 60, 80, 100? And I think they had at the bare minimum 45, 65, 85, 105. And somehow they would have a package. They would have 45, 65, 80, 100. Or 40, 65, 85, 108. And these strange things that were there. And I had to take a little time to come up with a concentric, consistent, set of strings.
Sure.
And that, I think, was just a kind of a new thing. And that's, even now, bass players aren't quite aware of the fact that you can get lower strings, still get a lot of bass sound, and not strain or mess up your hands. So I did that. I mean, tweeters, I'm not a big tweeter fan, and I'm one of the first guys to emphasize no tweeters. Was one of the, I mean, I didn't invent 15-inch speakers. That's the Jamerson sound right there. Jocko had the 18-inch, backward thing. But in this modern day and age, more people are now attending to the 15 as a fuller range sound. Sure. I didn't invent that, but there was something else I was going to say. I had invented, certainly in the musical thing, and I hope I'm not being too forward here. When Jocko played Portrait of Tracy, it was sort of the premiere of an entirely new manner, a new paradigm of bass playing. Mm-hmm. In 1985, when I had a solo record, being a violinist and trained in music, classical music, and having 4 strings, I did an arrangement of Dixie. And I might be the first guy to actually play a chordal interwoven with harmony in one line going one way and another one going the other way. So I was a pretty good pioneer in a lot of things regarding bass, and I'm quite proud of that. There's other things, but I don't want to toot my own horn.
No, but I mean that's
you've heard of diet chicken? It's me. Okay.
Well, no,
No
all these people are very rich that you gave her ideas.
Well, there it is. I mean, today people often. Well, I will go for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm sort of known for dissing a lot in bass education, because a lot in bass education isn't the exception, it's the norm, and almost the entirety of how I see bass education working. So I'll say these things don't work, and people will say to me, well, you're putting things down. What have you contributed to boost things up?
Sure.
What have you done? I mean, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Well, what have you done to help us to learn how to play better when all I've heard you say is this doesn't work? And I felt that was a very good point. But I would list it. And I said I created, for years on my own dime, I created videos for people to practice, each one with a different musical principle to practice. I did that for years. I mean, in every clinic I ever did, I would write out exercises and give it to people to do. On the internet, I would give away lessons constantly. I gave stuff away. I gave free lessons to people who couldn't afford them. I was, and as I say, the chord tone thing, even the approach note thing, I gave a lot of myself and never made 1 penny from it. And that sort of bodes towards the bass innovations that I had done for the instrument. And certain pickup sounds, that's another thing, but I won't get into that.
Sure.
And I created and did a lot. Am I, when I got there at the late 70s, by the invitation of Pat Hicks, about 1980 I think I went, it was a reasonably small school. On, to help, again, this was my mentality. I got Eddie Van Halen Bill Bruford, Neil Peart, Stanley Clark I might have got, I don't recall that, but Jocko came in because of me. There was a slew of guys, and I would get musicians, because I was fairly in the height of my name at that time, to come into the school and help promote the school. And I did this in order to help lift that
Sure.
up. And my hope is, afterward, maybe I could earn a percentage or for my efforts. When I left MI to move out of Los Angeles, my Christmas check, the royalty check when I was there, was $12 and a few cents. So what I realize is that due to my weak attention to being compensated for my efforts, I said this has to stop. And that's why, just as a quick thing, that's why I got into this lesson thing, because I thought it's about time I earned money for my efforts. A lot of people did get money off of me. A lot of people did do well because of my suggestions and my rather forthright giving of stuff. Rather done stupidly. I never really had the brains to understand that, but I don't regret it. I don't. But now
it's still pretty rare to find musicians who have a really good business acumen. That they can really do the business side of what they do, because the better the player, usually the more they're focused on playing. So I think that happened to Alan Holdsworth too. Alan invented a lot of things that I don't think he ever really received credit for
or money for.
Right. I guess yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like real inventions that kind of revolutionized the guitar, but
Correct.
was never able really to capitalize on it because he was never in a position to do it, or didn't want to do it, or musicians are also afraid to ask. I
Oh,
think a lot
yes.
of, asking is a tough thing.
Yeah, I totally agree 100%, and thankfully I learned that lesson. So I don't think I'm wrong to say, please don't take my lessons and
Right, we wanted to
pirated them and.
Well, we wanted to talk about that because, again, this is the brave new world, right, where anybody can take anything and send it to anyone else, and we're hoping that with these lessons that, we're building a community of people that respect the fact that this is how everyone's making money.
Right.
We're in this to obviously teach people and make money to do more things, and if people send this around and steal it, share with other friends, then obviously we don't get paid for that. So that's a big thing now.
I agree with you. You go to a store and you pay money for a hard item, or a meal, or some, a service. It's reasonable. And I would also ask, if anyone's listening after my 90 minutes of talking about me, I got more to say about me if you want to say on the air. I would say, please don't do that. Please do not share. Let people make the purchase as I and you and all of us purchase things, reasonably paying money so that we can make a living and and provide a good service for it. So, I would make that.
I've taught this for a number of years. It's intellectual property. Intellectual property for musicians now is free, but it's not free.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be free. We're supposed to get paid for our intellectual property. I don't know how it became free, other than people, I guess, don't have the conscience to say, I should really pay for this.
It's an educational thing too. I think people are not meaning to be mercenary about it. It's not malicious. I got this thing. Hey, Billy, look at this. Look what I have. Oh, can you make me copies? Well, sure. I don't think it's malicious. It's more of an educational thing to make people aware. When I got to Florida, it was right after the Northridge earthquake, which scared me to the core of my being, man. I do not want to go through anything like that again. I got to Florida, and somebody heard I was there, and he was a jingle guy or something. Actually, never mind his name. So he calls me up. He goes, "Yeah, I have a jingle. We want to do. You want to do a jingle?" I said, "Sure." Or do a recording session for my son. You want to do a recording session? I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll charge you $500." He says, "Well, I thought I'd give you $50." I said, "You really are offering $50 to me?" I said, "One, without being egotistical here, you're offering me $50 to do a session?" And the answer was, "Well, you're there, you're hanging out, you're not really doing much, you're not working, it's just..." And it was honestly his explanation. So and I've had the experience, and you've had, we've had the experience.
We've been down this road together also. Yeah.
Have we not? Where people are surprised. We want to do this thing with you, but you want us to give you money for it too? And it's a disappointment, man.
Yeah, it's like... They're shocked. Oh, you want to get paid?
Want to get paid? Yeah.
I said, try hiring a lawyer. Try hiring a doctor, a plumber.
Right.
They get paid then.
Well, I've actually found the same thing when I go online and I'll write a post or something and say, well, if you want to learn and if you're looking to learn, these are the ways to do it. It's important. These other ways, like it or not, are not going to give you what you want because they never have in other forms of music. So these are, you got to do this. And people would actually write and say, listen, man, I mean, what are you so intense about this? It's not like it's brain surgery or that important or nobody's dying or, you know, why don't you just let people be? And I was I never answered it publicly, but it states that music is not that important. What's the big deal? And I can agree that I can buy golf clubs and go up to the putting range and not feel guilty about it. But I don't have really a right to call myself a golfer. And I think that music, certainly for myself and you and others that are listening, it's as important as life itself, as breath, as health, as love, you know, as security. Music counts to where people have died for it. And I don't recommend people dying for it, but they have literally.
Sure.
What's that fun movie? It's like a serious movie, but it was fun. It was Kirk Douglas playing a jazz trumpet player.
Oh,
and
yes.
he wouldn't go commercial. And ultimately, he died on the street, laying half on and half off a curb, and the rain is washing over him, like laying in the curb. But his trumpet is under his arm. And while I don't recommend that, I liked the imagery of a guy so dedicated to the importance of music that he literally, unfortunately, died for it. So I have no truck with people who say, well, it isn't that important. I say, well, I beg to differ. It is greatly and most necessary. Yeah.
Of course. Well, should we wrap this up? Are there any
Yeah.
other things you want to talk about?
Yeah. How'd they part the Red Sea and the Ten Commandments? I never knew how they did that.
That's a conundrum.
That's a conundrum?
And how about that Trump?
About that Trump.
And the Yankees. What else can we talk about? I think we should talk about
Yankees,
religion and
Trump.
politics now. I think
Want to talk about religion and politics? That's it. You know God.
Where does space
Have you ever heard of God?
How does religion and bass playing go together?
I was sleeping and God spoke to me last night. And I'm on my meds, so I know it was really God.
We didn't cover your after Bruford period, but we'll get to that another
I did a lot. It was a fun thing. I should talk about the Van Halen thing and
we'll come back. We'll have more of these.
I hope this was entertaining, and I hope I didn't monologue too much.
I didn't make you cry though.
No, you didn't.
Make you cry.
You didn't cry, make me cry, but you did made me remember that I didn't earn any money from Slender Bass Necks, and I really don't appreciate
just like to throw that out for you. Yes, screwed again.
Screwed again. So thanks everybody. That's
Thank
very
you.
kind of you to be here. This is John McCracken, my dear friend, my producer, the producer of Joe Frazier, the producer of all the bass lessons that I have been writing, the upcoming producer of Jack Bruce, the upcoming producer of my classical recordings that I subsequently will be doing, and all on other projects that we have in mind. We're thinking of doing a live, let's say, I don't like to use the word camp, but I would say gatherings, a place where bass players who are interested in learning how to play better.
Yep.
I think the best way to do this is to sit down and talk and show you. And I can do it en masse. So we're planning that. We have a lot of plans, and thanks, John, for hanging with me today.
Welcome, Jeff. A lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
More to talk about. I'm really going to grill you next time.
Hey.
Bye.
All right.